This video is brought to you by Squarespace, an all-in-one platform for building your brand and growing your business online. Hey everyone, my name is Mina, and if you're new here, welcome. If you're a returning viewer, it's been a while. It's been actually a really long time. This is the longest hiatus I've taken since I started my channel 3 years ago. And honestly, I was just getting like really burnt out and tired and exhausted, and I feel like it was coming across my videos, like I just wasn't as excited. And so I took a break for my mental health, and I'm back now, and I feel so re-energized and so excited about everything, about life, about fashion, about movies, about literally everything. So I'm so excited to just get the ball rolling again. Also, quick announcement, I have a Patreon. If you don't know, if you want to support me on there, I also have a podcast that I post bi-weekly too. And I'm practically active on like every social media because I'm addicted to the internet. All right, let's just get started. So in 1991, two German tourists were hiking down a glacier in the Ötztal Alps when they came across a preserved mummy frozen in ice. This mummy was named Ötzi, and turns out he was alive 5,300 years ago during the Copper Age. I didn't even know there was a Copper Age. Like, I thought it was just the Bronze, the Iron, Silver? Is there a Silver Age? Definitely have never heard of Copper, though. So this was new. Ötzi was found wearing a cloak of woven grass and a coat, belt, leggings, loincloth, and shoes, all made of different leathers.
Now, about the shoes.
While men of Ötzi's time period most likely were barefoot at low elevations, these shoes were made for him specifically to walk along the rocky slopes of the Alps. Shoe historians Peter Lavacek and Vaclav Grisek reconstructed the shoes using leather uppers and soles stretched across a netting of braided linden bark and stuffed with hay and moss. Thanks to microscopic analysis, they discovered that Ötzi's uppers were specifically made of deer skin, the bindings out of calf skin, and the soles out of bear skin. The two historians then tanned the leathers using historical methods with pig brain and livers, cut the leather into pieces with a piece of flint, and sewed them together with a bone needle. Lavacek and Grisek also measured the tensile strength of the leather, the thermal conductivity of the hay, the sole's adhesion to ice, and they taped pressure sensors to the bottom of their feet, slipped on the shoes, and walked on a treadmill. If you don't understand what any of that means, I didn't either. The important thing is that their findings were that aside from the tensile strength, the shoes outperformed modern shoes in every other category. The hay had more loft and was better insulating than standard synthetics, and the bearskin gripped as well as the best rubber. The shoes were so well cushioned that the body's weight was evenly distributed across the soles. To craft a pair of shoes like this took an incredible amount of specialized skill. Lavacek told The Telegraph in 2005, "I'm convinced that even 5,300 years ago, people had the equivalent of a cobbler who made shoes for other people." In 2001, Lavacek and 3 other colleagues took their experiment to the next level, embarking on an expedition in the Alps, climbing over 1,500 meters across snow-covered glaciers, granite scree, and streams of meltwater barely above freezing temperatures, wearing the shoes. By the time they reached Ötzi's gravesite, one of the climbers, Vaclav Patek, who was also a designer of mountain climbing shoes, declared that the boots were more comfortable and capable than any he'd worn. Lavacek told The New Yorker, "It is a miracle in these shoes you can practically not obtain the blisters." 5,300 years ago, before the Egyptian pyramids and Stonehenge even, early humans cracked the code for comfortable, quality clothing. Yet in the modern era, with all the resources and tools at our disposal, we're stuck creating coats that don't keep us warm and shirts that last like 4 to 5 years. So let's discuss. I first got along to thinking about this when I came across this tweet before deleting Twitter. And I'm aware that sounds like I deleted Twitter because of this tweet, and trust me, I didn't, but you know what, let's just spread that rumor. I deleted Twitter because of sweater discourse. Because of Ben Schwartz specifically. So basically, actor Ben Schwartz, he recreated a film still from When Harry Met Sally, and it features Billy Crystal wearing this very famous outfit. I don't know. It's like an outfit that I feel like goes viral every fall, winter, when people are looking for outfit inspiration. Anyways, Ben Schwartz recreated this look, and then a lot of people, of course, took to Twitter pointing out the differences between the two sweaters.
Do you like this sweater?
No! No!
And specifically the difference in perceived quality. So for this video, I want to dive into why clothes are kind of worse now than they've ever been, and also give tips on how to shop for a decent sweater despite the odds against us. Thank you, Squarespace, for sponsoring this video. Squarespace is a fantastic platform and they have so many customization options, so you can definitely build whatever kind of website you want to build. They also use a new website design system called Fluid Engine, which lets you customize every design detail with this unique drag and drop technology. And you can, of course, use it to design both your website's desktop and mobile layouts. You can also use your website to set up a store. Squarespace offers storefront capabilities to sell anything from physical products to memberships to courses. Squarespace also allows you to send newsletters, welcome emails, announcements for upcoming sales. All of these can help introduce your brand, your work, or yourself to any new subscribers. Check out squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/Mina to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. First things first, we gotta establish what kind of sweater Billy and Ben are wearing. They're both wearing Aran jumpers, or at least sweaters inspired by the Aran jumper. For those of you who don't know, the Aran jumper, otherwise known as the Aran sweater, otherwise known as a fisherman's sweater, is a densely textured knit garment with cable stitch patterns. It originated from the Aran Islands, which is a group of islands that are part of the Republic of Ireland. Made from the cream-colored wool of rugged coastal sheep, these sweaters were intended to keep fishermen warm and dry while seafaring. This wool, known as bawneen, was minimally processed so as to maintain its high lanolin content. And lanolin is sheep grease, but it contributes to the resulting garment's water resistance. Originally, these sweaters were also hand knitted by local Irish women. Nowadays, most of these sweaters are machine knitted from imported wool and not always made in Ireland. There's also a very popular myth about the Aran jumper, and I swear to God, this was listed on every single website, almost every single website that specializes in Aran knits, but it is a myth. And it's mostly spread around in tourist manuals. It's mostly to sell this product and make it more elusive sounding. But it's not true. It's a myth. Okay, anyways. The myth basically spreads this belief that each family on the island developed their own unique pattern of stitches and cables. The story goes like this. A fisherman goes out onto the dangerous Atlantic Ocean, wearing a jumper knitted by his female relations. Trying to earn a living, he is lost at sea. His battered body, once washed ashore, is unrecognizable. His jumper, however, identifies the corpse as belonging to one particular family, who can then claim and bury his body. So, while poetic, as I said, the myth is false. Stitching pattern is not unique to any particular family. Who, might you ask, is spreading this rumor around? One goes back to James Millington Synge's 1904 play, Riders to the Sea. This play is set in the Aran Islands, and it features a scene in which a drowned man's body is identified by his sister from a small mistake, a drop stitch, in one of the socks that she remembers knitting for him. Many people trace the commercial success of the Aran jumper back to Muriel Gahan. In 1930, Gahan opened a shop in Dublin called The Country Shop as an outlet for the products of the cottage industries, such as weaving, that rural families, particularly women, used to support themselves. She virtually made this knitwear available for purchase in the capital city. Also in the 1930s, most of Ireland was newly independent from the UK and still recovering from the civil war that followed partition in 1921. During this turbulent time, the Irish were eager to link Ireland's pre-conquest past with its present, in part influenced by the fact that romantic nationalism was becoming fashionable across Northern Europe in general. As an example of this, a German textile enthusiast, Heinz Kehoe, suggested a direct connection between the patterns on Aran jumpers and the so-called Celtic swirl designs of medieval and even pre-Christian Ireland, a theory he began promoting in 1938 and elaborated in a later book called The Sacred History of Knitting. Hand-knit sweaters were the perfect vehicle to create identity, especially because, as Joanne Turney observes, there's an innate romanticness of the rural and the untainted vernacular practices of simple people existing in more simple times. So, the Aran jumper became really Irish, and it was so Irish that it was further used as a political statement, especially during the start of the Troubles in the 60s and 70s. The Troubles was a violent ethno-nationalist conflict in Northern Ireland, and a key issue during the Troubles was that the Unionists and Loyalists, who were mostly Protestant, wanted Northern Ireland to stay part of the UK, but the Irish Nationalists and Republicans, who were mostly Catholic, wanted Northern Ireland to be reunified with Ireland. Due to the association between Aran jumpers and Ireland, prominent Republicans were said to have worn Aran jumpers. For example, journalist Ed Curran recalls first meeting Martin McGuinness in 1972. McGuinness was a member of Sinn Féin, one of the Irish Republican political parties, and also a leader of the associated paramilitary group, the IRA. In the article, Curran described McGuinness as a young, curly-haired man dressed in a soiled Aran sweater. Dr. Siún Carden, a research fellow at the University of the Highlands and Islands, wrote for Costume, the Journal of the Costume Society. Worn by the public faces of republicanism in this way, the Aran jumper is a comfortable, relaxed, confident way of saying, I am Irish, and so is the north of Ireland. On paper, the Troubles ended in 1998 with the Belfast Agreement signed by the British and Irish governments and the 8 political parties or groupings from Northern Ireland, including Sinn Féin. In 2003, The Guardian published an article noting that some people were now criticizing Sinn Féin for their new, more moderate policies along the peace process, saying the party was swapping AK-47s for Armani suits. The implication was that these once radical politicians were getting bought out and bribed with expensive clothes, cars, and holiday homes. In a 2009 interview, the artist Rita Duffy recalls that during the peace process, the black leather jackets disappeared, the woolly jumpers disappeared, and in place of the IRA's infamous slogan, Chakarla, our day will come, the new phrase, Chuck Armani, was coined. The link between Irish identity and the Aran jumper was thus solidified, and American tourism to Ireland only increased the sweater's appeal in the mid-century. Starting in the 1950s, with the growth of the airline industry, American tourism spiked. The subsequent massive increase in American visitors to Ireland created the Aran jumper as a global market commodity. Also, in 1961, the Clancy brothers, Ireland's biggest cultural export of the decade, appeared on US TV for the first time to an audience of 50 million viewers, wearing, of course, their Aran jumpers.
How did the Bonnier sweater bit start?
Our mother, the Clancy's mother, sent over 3 of them, and our manager saw them and he said, that's what I want. I want something to show that you're from Ireland.
He was looking for a package to put us in.
And so the garment was etched into the American pop culture overnight. American stars Steve McQueen, Marilyn Monroe, and Grace Kelly were all photographed or filmed wearing Aran or Aran-inspired knitwear in the 1950s and 60s. In the high fashion space, designer Digby Borton featured Aran-inspired hand knits in his 1955 autumn show in London, which caught even Vogue's attention. Considering all these factors, it's maybe unsurprising that per year, a third of the 600,000 yards of Irish wool produced by Gaeltara Éireann, I don't know if I pronounced that right, which is the national body for rural development at the time, was being exported to America by 1956. Since the 60s, Aran knit has gone in and out of style, most recently making a resurgence in 2019 with Chris Evans' viral sweater moment in Knives Out, and again in 2020 when Taylor Swift was photographed wearing one. So now that we've established the history of the Aran jumper, let's take a closer look at Billy and Ben's sweaters. So it's pretty obvious that despite the Aran homage, they're completely different. One Twitter user even said that it looked like Ben's sweater was circumcised. I don't even know how people come up with this stuff. Billy's sweater uses a heavier weighted yarn and it features double ribbing at the collar and cuffs, whereas Ben's sweater is made of a thin yarn. Normally, a heavy weight is viewed in our minds as more expensive because it looks more plush and comfortable, but that's not necessarily true. It's kind of impossible to know the quality difference unless you can actually feel them both at the same time. I also think that part of the reason why people feel that Billy's sweater is higher quality is because they just like it more aesthetically. And it totally makes sense. Aran sweaters are traditionally on the thicker side. The point was for them to be practical and insulating. And the mass appeal of the Aran jumper, to begin with, is rooted in this kind of vintage, rustic, fisherman nostalgia vibe that gets lost in a sweater like Ben's, which looks so much more modern. This is not a sweater meant to be worn to sea. It's a sweater meant to be worn over heat tech and under another coat.
Okay, take off that sweater.
I'm not taking it off.
There are definitely still sweaters on the market now that are heavy like Billy's. Ben probably just went through his wardrobe and found a cream sweater he already owned instead of buying a new one that matched the original look. If that's the case, sustainable king, and my hat's off to him.
You got him right here. Leave a message after the beep.
Another thing that people were saying in the replies and quote tweets, though, was that back in the day, you could find a sweater like Billy's for $20, but now it'd probably cost around $400. So let's explore the question, has good quality become more expensive? Abso-fucking-lutely, and not just because of inflation. For example, the price of high-end women's dresses climbed an average of 250% between 1998 and 2010. Like, why did this happen? Pricing high tricks consumers into thinking that a product is more exclusive, even if it actually wasn't that expensive to make. The rich are interested in maintaining their rich status, which means wearing something that is completely unaffordable to the poor. And over the years, the rich keep getting richer. As the EPI reports, the top 1% earned 14.6% of all wages in 2021, twice as high as their 7.3% share in 1979. And this affects clothing prices because if there's a niche of people willing to pay the highest prices, then luxury stores will sell at those prices. And I don't want to rewrite history because there have always been unaffordable clothes targeted to the very rich. But in the days before fast fashion, if you couldn't afford something expensive, then you could at least sew it yourself or hire a dressmaker to make a copy of the original design for cheaper. For example, around 1902, when lingerie-style dresses came into vogue, in her book Service and Style, Jan Whitaker found that these dresses were available at Marshall Field's for $25 to $75, which is $893 to $2,678 in today's money. This was very unaffordable for a lot of people. To be more inclusive, during the Christmas shopping season of 1902, department stores sold enormous volumes of lace and embroidery, as many women opted to just make their own versions of the lingerie dress. And if people did buy clothes from a department store, they looked for investment pieces that they could show off. As a result, the clothing at department stores was generally pretty good quality. In the 1950s, even Sears, which is a catalog and chain store known for its cheap goods, had quality standards. In the back of a 1955 Sears catalog, a picture taken inside their apparel testing laboratory is accompanied by a guide to buying wisely, which lays out the differences between reprocessed and virgin wool, sun-fast versus sun-resistant fabrics, as well as a glossary of every man-made fiber used at the time. Even discount stores had to aim higher during the period to lure in the middle class, because what is preventing someone from just sewing the dress themselves? It'd probably be cheaper. For someone to buy a fully made dress, it had to be a certain quality that they couldn't achieve themselves. Elizabeth Klein wrote in her book Overdressed, clothing of this era was produced by small-scale, independent manufacturers, and the garment trade was highly competitive, which often resulted in more stylish, more detailed, and better constructed clothing than we find in stores today. At the same time, there are people who think a $200 jacket today is overpriced, when actually, when adjusted for inflation, that would be considered mid-priced by historical standards. This is because, according to Klein, the widespread availability of ultra-cheap clothing compels the domestic industry to brand itself as high-end, when often it is producing and selling what was historically a mid-priced garment. So it's no surprise that clothing quality has gone down, mostly because of fast fashion. Jan Whitaker still remembers the days pre-fast fashion when most store-bought clothes are finished with a blind hem, which is a labor-intensive and subtle type of stitch that's almost invisible. If the clothes didn't have a blind hem, women often re-sewed hems to make a garment look more expensive. She recalls, "You never saw clothes that were sewn with a straight hem. That was considered trash. Even poor people didn't wear clothes with a hem like that. Now, that's the norm." Today, by contrast, most mass market clothes are finished with a quick, simple, straight hem, and seams are closed with a serger, which is a type of machine that joins fabric with an overlock stitch and then cuts away any extra material. There is virtually no loose material left on the side seams or hems, which used to be the standard, so nowadays clothes can no longer be let out and are harder to alter if they don't fit you perfectly. This is done, of course, to cut costs. Cheap clothing skimps on labor-intensive details like lining, gussets, and stronger seams. But skimping out on these kinds of reinforcing details means our clothes are more likely to fall apart with repeated wear. Also, with fast fashion, there are deadlines and production quotas that have to be met. There are a lot of skilled sewers based in developing countries, but if they're running on tight deadlines, that means that sewing ends up being sloppy. The actual fabric quality clothes are made of has gone down too. Before fast fashion, when clothes were more expensive and people shopped less, people really cared about the longevity of their clothing and paid a lot of attention to fabric labels. Nowadays, the synthetic fabric polyester accounts for more than 40% of all fiber produced in the world. Klein suggests that the main reason for this is because Asia has poured enormous investments into polyester, with China producing well over half of all polyester production. Polyester is also very cheap. And to create low-cost garments, companies are flocking to cheaper materials like polyester and viscose to cut costs. Sean Cormier, a textile development and marketing professor at FIT, says the pressure to produce a lower grade product comes both from cheapskate consumers and from companies wanting to increase their profits. It's a two-way street. Obviously, the manufacturers are trying to make money, but the consumers are just waiting until stuff goes on sale. Clothing companies can't afford to have consumers buy their well-made stuff on sale and continue to offer the same quality product year after year. Something has to give. Another effort to shave costs is using thinner and lighter fabrics. Cormier told Klein that he's seen companies take a 6-ounce shirt and reduce it to 5 ounces. He says, does it still meet the company's quality standards? Yes, but is it as aesthetically as nice? Sometimes no. As an aside, not everything expensive is that well made either though. For example, designer t-shirts that retail for like $800 are not doing anything remarkable. So there are definitely luxury brands that are just trying to maximize profits too. Let's bring it back to sweaters though. As I said, Aran jumpers were originally hand knit, not machine knit, and hand knitting is unfortunately a dying craft. It takes days to make one sweater by hand, so a company that specializes in hand knit can't sell as many and as fast as a company that sells machine knit. There are a few stores left that make hand knit, such as Emaille, run by the Emaille family for the past 80 plus years, and the Tweed Project, a newer brand focused on embracing traditional Irish crafts, both located in Galway, Ireland. For me, I'm not a stickler when it comes to hand knit versus machine knit, but I'm just saying that if it's hand knit, it'll probably be more expensive because it took longer to make. When I look at sweaters, what I care about is fabric, which like in other types of clothing has gone downhill too. Actually, back in 1999, Rebecca Mead was already writing on the quality of cashmere going downhill for The New Yorker. Currently, China and Mongolia are the sources of most of the world's cashmere, and in the 90s, Mongolia's economic liberalization and land reform programs led to the country severely increasing their cashmere output. In 1991, it's estimated there were 5.2 million goats in Mongolia. In 2004, it was 25.8 million. According to Mead, as the number of goats has grown in Mongolia, quality has declined. This is partly because much of the stock was corrupted by crossbreeding with coarser-haired Angora goats in an effort to boost production. Another reason, though, and probably more environmentally destructive, is that the enormous amount of goats led to overgrazing. Overgrazing has led to dust storms and degradation of the region's soil, water, and air, affecting all the people, plants, and animals that live there. With less food supply, the goats started getting hungry, and their lack of quality diet led them to grow shorter, coarser hair. Ultimately, the mass availability of cashmere has had the effect of driving down the quality of even the cheapest sweaters. Dick Forte, who is the president of Dawson Forte Cashmere, explains short cashmere, which is 20 millimeters long, can trade for as little as $25 a kilo, while long cashmere is now trading at $55 a kilo. You cannot make a good sweater out of short fiber. What you're going to find is that newcomers who are totally cost conscious are just going to make a terrible sweater. It will be 100% cashmere, but it will be terrible.
Okay, just like as a disclaimer, this section, I'm not trying to police anyone or shame anyone. I'm just trying to give tips on how I like to find quality sweaters that I hope will last my entire life. That's not going to be everyone's priority when they're shopping, and that's fine. So I'm not trying to like tell you that if you don't shop this way, you're like doing a bad job or anything. Like, this is just a guide for people who are looking for an investment piece that's going to last them hopefully their whole lives, and who don't want to make a bad investment, because there are a lot of expensive sweaters out there that are not going to do what they promise. And I just like want to share how I learn and how I do things, yeah, in case you are interested.
Hi. I'd like to buy a sweater. A sweater?
Not all cashmere is created equal, but retailers that promote their 100% cashmere sweaters that cost $100 are too good to be true. And if you notice, a lot of these times, these retailers won't disclose the details of the cashmere yarn they're using because they're using cheap cashmere. So cashmere yarn is graded by 3 factors: thickness of the fiber, which is measured in microns, average length of the fiber, usually measured in millimeters, and percentage of short fibers in the yarn. Rebecca Mead wrote in 1991, "It is generally accepted by reputable manufacturers that the length of a good cashmere fiber is somewhere between 32 and 38 millimeters. When the length drops to 25 millimeters, the fabric will pill more easily. The width of a Mongolian cashmere fiber should be no more than 16.5 microns, a fraction of the width of a human hair." Essentially, short fibers are what cause pilling, so if the percentage of short fibers is more than 10%, there will probably be a noticeable pilling issue. Of course, all knitwear pills, like we have to be realistic here, but some more than others. Also, a lot of times during milling, manufacturers will add chemicals or overwash the yarn to reduce pilling of low-quality cashmere. However, the long-term effect is that these processes weaken the yarn, leading the sweater to be less durable overall. Generally, if there's no information about the cashmere, I would pass on buying the garment if you're looking for a true investment piece that will actually last you decades. Cashmere is really soft and feels luxurious, but it's less durable and more likely to pill. I usually avoid it unless it's vintage. For sweaters, I prefer 100% wool, which is more affordable than cashmere. Wool is durable, warm, relatively light, water resistant, and the natural crimp that the fibers have means the garments hold their shape really well. It also is a natural fiber and is therefore breathable and doesn't get too hot. I also love cotton, but it's definitely not as insulating during the wintertime and doesn't hold shape very well, just like by the nature of how cotton is designed. By the Lord. Why did I say that? In terms of animal welfare, it's not looking too good, truthfully. Some people say there's no way to ethically farm wool because animals shouldn't be exploited in the first place, but others defend animal-derived fabrics as long as the animals are treated humanely while alive. The issue, if you agree with the second troop, is that it's hard to monitor farms into compliance, made more difficult by the fact that countries have different laws. For example, there's a practice called mulesing, which is illegal in New Zealand and Europe, but is legal in Australia, where 70% of merino wool is produced. I won't go into the nasty details, but mulesing is very painful for the sheep and is done to prevent blowflies from laying eggs on the sheep's back, which if they hatch will feed on the sheep's skin and cause it to die. However, this parasitic fate can be prevented humanely by breeding them responsibly, monitoring the sheep, and keeping them clean. It's important to understand that sheep, because of selective breeding, will keep growing their coats out and need to be sheared by humans regardless to prevent overheating. However, the problem is the way that people go about it when profit is the only thing that they care about. Shearing shouldn't be painful. The reasons why people do things inhumanely is much like factory farming, because they're trying to produce as much as possible, leading to bigger flocks that they can't monitor free range, and then trying to do things as automated and cheaply as possible, which leads to using dangerous accident-prone machines and lack of anesthesia or medical care for the animals. Vintage or secondhand is going to be the best choice, obviously, but if you're insistent on buying new wool, look for these types of certifications. Responsible Wool Standard, RWS, Certified Organic Wool, Certified Animal Welfare, Certified Humane, ZQ Merino, Soil Association, and Climate Beneficial Wool by Fibershed. I also discovered Sheep Inc. the other day, which is a ZQ Merino certified brand. It's a company that is very transparent about their production. On their website, they have a 15-page sustainability report, detailed product pages, including what chemical the yarn they make sweaters out of is treated with, and a link to their sweater clinic, where they offer lifetime repairs in case you need to fix up your sweater anytime in the future. As just an aside, there are not enough brands who do this, and I know why they do this is because it eats into their profits. If the clothes in your closet deteriorate, then you have to buy more clothes and it ends up benefiting them. But it would be so helpful if more companies invested in having a sweater clinic or some kind of repair clinic and offering lifetime mending to their customers. Hermes does it for their luxury bags, which makes sense because those bags are so expensive. But I would definitely spend more money on an item of clothing if I knew that if anything happened to it, I could just send it in and they would fix it up for me. I got the sweater and I'm so excited. It's so soft and it smells so good, and I really want to show you because the packaging is so cute. On the back, it has a little instruction guide on how to take care of your sweater. Yeah, and it says when you're done, if you don't want the sweater anymore, your knitwear is made to last a lifetime, but it is also totally biodegradable. Put it in the compost and it will be gone within the year. If you don't have a compost, send it back to them and they will find it another home, recycle it, or find the next most environmentally friendly way to dispose of it. So when you scan the QR code, it takes you to the sweater page and it just tells you about your sweater. I gave my sheep the nickname Basquiat. You can name it whatever you want. Maria is the name of the woman who hand finished the sweater. It also tells you the carbon footprint, and you can see the carbon footprint for all of these specific parts of the sweater making process, but then total it ends up being negative. More information here. And it tells you the date, which is really cool. So my garment was actually knitted in 2021. And then if you go to this tab, you can see your sheep. So it tells you some details about the sheep. Obviously, it takes more than one sheep probably to make this particular sweater, like the wool gets combined and whatnot. But it tells me where all the sheep are living. And then when you want to interact with it, it becomes this Tamagotchi game. And then you can also look at the actual farm that the sheep came from and read about their regenerative farming practices. And you can see some of the videos that they have featured about the farm. But yeah, really super cool. You see, like, once we see what can be offered, it becomes so irritating to not get this kind of transparency everywhere we shop. But honestly, most companies probably have no idea where their fabric is sourced from. A lot of processes in the production process as a whole are so alienated. So a lot of these companies, like, they just know where the clothes are getting made. Like, they know what factory is making the clothes. And the factory, they know where the fabric is coming from, but they don't know how the fabric was made. And then the fabric makers know how the fabric is made, but they don't know how the sheep are being treated or how the workers who are farming the cotton are being treated. Like, all these steps in the process are so alienated from each other, and it's very rare, unfortunately, that a company is able to trace back right from the source. But they should be able to, because we should know if we're buying something, right? Back to fabrics, though. I personally stay away from acrylic, polyester, or any synthetic fabric. Not only are these really bad for the environment because they're made of plastic and thus use a lot of fossil fuels to produce, release microplastics in the air and waterways, and won't biodegrade, they also tend to pill more and are way less breathable, which makes me feel really sweaty and gross. So the real issue is not all the environmental destruction that these fabrics are causing in our ecosystem, but it's the fact that they make me sweat and they trap my sweat. I'm just kidding.
You're sweating.
Also, I stay away from synthetic fabric blends. So what this means is when they blend a natural fiber with a synthetic fiber, it's like when you read on the little label, it says like 50% wool and 50% acrylic. These are not as bad for the environment because they take less fossil fuels to make, but they won't biodegrade, so they're still bad for the environment. Also, they're cheaper to make, so the wool that's used in the blend is usually a lower quality wool. As David Giles Kay, co-founder of knitwear manufacturer Hatch & Make, told The Guardian, wool synthetic blends are almost impossible to recycle. They need more cleaning, so they quickly start to look washed out and shabby, and the synthetic microfibers constantly pollute the environment. However, according to Textile R, natural fiber blends are biodegradable. So that's when a cotton fabric is blended with a wool fabric, for instance, and those I will still buy. But at the end of the day, there are very, very few options that are truly ethical. For example, unless it's organic, even a natural fiber like cotton is treated with a lot of chemicals, so many cotton growers in mostly developing countries have been severely poisoned due to overexposure to pesticides. Cotton also uses a lot of water, yet is grown in a lot of water-scarce environments, depleting the limited water resources for people and animals that live in these environments. Honestly, I was debating for a while on whether to touch on the ethics of these fabric options because I don't want to come across as like shaming anyone or a doomsday preacher. And I also don't myself wear 100% organic cotton. So like I definitely pick and choose what purchasing decisions I make based on what's reasonable for my personal circumstances. And I was afraid of coming across as a hypocrite because of that. But you know, and at the end of the day, these systemic failures are systemic. They are bigger than any one of us. I just decided that I wanted to put this information in here because I think it's important to know so we can be informed consumers because we have a right to know what we're buying. And this is also information that companies are hiding because they know what they're doing is bad, but it's cheap. And so they're hoping people won't find out or won't care enough so that they can continue doing the fucked up things they're doing. The good news is that there are so many organizations and brands working every day to change the industry, and supporting their initiatives is going to be infinitely more impactful than making a singular consumer purchasing decision. So I'll list some more at the end of the video, but for textile-specific organizations, Fibershed is a nonprofit that works to strengthen communities by focusing on local resources and promoting regenerative farming practices that sequester carbon. Textile Exchange is another organization that developed a strategy called Climate Plus to guide the industry towards reducing GHG emissions by 45% by 2030. Woolmark also has a petition going on, which you can sign, calling for more fabric description transparency online. But let's get back to looking at sweater quality. I would mostly ignore country of origin unless the company is extremely transparent about every step of the manufacturing process. Because the reality is, while Scotland and Italy have the best global reputations for quality knits, they've just been in the game for like a really long time, especially when it comes to cashmere. Many brands that are based in these countries still produce in China. And just because something is made in China does not necessarily mean the garment's going to be bad quality or made in a sweatshop. Likewise, there are many atrocious factories across the US and Europe that are unregulated and paying people below minimum wage. So I definitely don't think country of origin really tells you anything in terms of like ethics or quality. And then, of course, there are some details in a sweater you can see by holding it that will tell you if it's going to be more durable. Obviously, this is like hard to do now that we're shopping online so much, but if you're shopping in person, play around with the sweater before you purchase it. For example, one thing to look for is a sweater where the yarn was spun and knit tightly, because that's going to be more durable. A looser weave is more prone to rips and holes. Oftentimes, a tighter weave will cost more because this means that the fabric is dense, so more fabric had to go into the making of the sweater, but it's worth it in the long run. By the way, thinness is not the same as tightness. So a thin sweater with a tight weave can be very durable. To test the tightness, if you put your hand under a layer of the garment, like at the sleeve, and then you can see your hand, then the weave is not very tight. So honestly, like, I think the weave on this sweater could be tighter, like in this part, but like for the cuffs, it's pretty good. Like you can see the sweater weave. But I mean, I think this is still pretty good compared to a lot of sweaters that are on the market. Yeah, I mean, there's like different parts where it pulls more. But there are also definitely parts that are very tight. I'm like learning about my sweater as we go along. Also, a ribbed hem will generally hold better over time than a rolled hem. So yeah, these are just like little details that you can see in person that can tell you whether or not the sweater is gonna last longer. So these are just some tips to help, but it's really hard to determine how good a sweater is going to be unless you actually wear it. I prefer vintage sweaters for this reason, because if they've lasted 30 or so years already and still look really good, then they're probably still going to be durable for the next however many decades. As for cashmere, anything less than $400 new is probably going to be lower quality. If you are dying for a cashmere but don't want to spend that money, go for a vintage sweater made before the 90s cashmere boom. As for more resources to get on board with environmental justice, there's fashionrevolution.org that offers tons of resources, as well as a list of key organizations to donate to or volunteer with. I personally follow the Atmos Instagram account and newsletter. Atmos is a magazine that publishes articles relating to environmental justice, and also the Sustainable Baddie magazine run by my friend Jasmine, which is always posting positive eco-justice news and promoting sustainable fashion brands to support. Patagonia also has a page called ActionWorks that serves as a directory of local organizations you can volunteer for and campaigns that you can sign off on. You just enter where you're living to start. It's not available for every location, but it's worth checking out, especially if you want to be more locally involved. Also, okay, sidebar for Patagonia, because I was reading one of the books that I was reading. As always, I do list my sources in the description, so go there if you want to get more information on sustainability and ethical fashion. But one of the books I was reading, I can't remember which one, but they were talking about Patagonia and how the founder of Patagonia has always been really clear about his target demographic is like sports people, like outdoor people and not fashion people. And Patagonia's like fashion rebrand has been kind of like a coincidence. It's not something that he's like always aimed to do. He has like a lot of distaste for a lot of what like the fashion industry is. And so it's like this like beautiful irony that like so many people love Patagonia now as a fashion statement, but he's always really been someone who cares about the environment, or so it says on paper. Like, I don't know this man personally, so I can't say. If he says anything cancelable, like, forget this entire section. Patagonia sucks. But until then, Patagonia rocks, and check out their Action Works page. In general, there are so many organizations, and it's impossible to be involved with every single one, right? And I'm not trying to say that we should be involved in every single one, because I think that just leads to a lot of fatigue, and a lot of us like are not activists first. But my take is that we should all just pick one or two that we're really passionate about to support. For me, I'm really passionate about ocean preservation. I think it's because I wanted to be a marine biologist when I was younger. And so that's the work I'm most drawn to. But it's all important, so just go with where the heart wants to go. Okay. Anyways, thank you all so much for watching and for sticking around with me. It really means a lot, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your day. And I'll see you next time. Bye.